This installment of the GM's log for Table Talk is for session 1B, the second part of our first official episode of Star Trek Adventures First Response. Now, I know for people who have been following along that's probably confusing, but just to maintain the whole aesthetic, early on pilots were something which were not shown to the entire audience. They were just for a select group of viewers to determine whether or not a show would launch. And then the first episode was a different episode. Maybe later on, the pilot would be released or repurposed in some way. So to pay homage to that, our pilot is considered to be episode 0. And our current episode in progress, that's episode 1. That's the first thing that people ever got to see, if that makes sense. So this installment of Table Talk, unlike the others which have looked at the pregame talk and the postgame talk, in this particular case, we launched into play pretty much right away, as soon as record was hit. And so there really wasn't any pregame talk to talk about. So this is just the post-game discussion, and it talks about some pretty important things. Early on, I found that mostly what we were talking about were rules or the nature of Star Trek itself. We were still finding our way with each other as a group and refining the way we were expressing the aesthetic of the original series, that sort of stuff. But as play has continued, we are coming around more and more to be talking more and more about the events. How things were done, why things were done, how we might interpret things. And I'm finding these to have some value outside of the group in terms of learning the game, but also in exploring how to set up an ongoing open-ended campaign with Star Trek Adventures, but with other games as well. So some of the things we talk about here are the nature of extended tasks, the expectations we might have for extended tasks. Those who've been following the sessions as they build into episodes have probably noticed a fair degree of success. The players of this game certainly have noticed that they've been quite successful when extended tasks roll around. So we spent some time talking about how extended tasks are structured, how the dice work, and they have a more realistic outlook on what it might mean to be handed an extended task or to request one be set up than they did based on just on their own experience. So that was very valuable. Another thing that we talked about is the creation of secondary characters and what that might mean, the supporting cast. What are some of the freedoms or expectations that we all have about them, and how would we like to see it done? Because there are a variety of ways that we could look at doing that, especially within the specific context of the specific ship that you're using in your specific campaign. And we have some very juicy background elements concerning the former USS Dauntless, the current USS Avicenna. What does it mean to have a crew that has converted over from being a destroyer on patrol duty to being a what? On exactly what kind of duty? For them, it would all be quite new, even though they've been doing it for about a year or so. So what does it mean to be a crisis response vessel? What does it mean to be a part of this, what we're imagining is a new service within Starfleet, the Aid and Relief Service? What does all of that actually mean? And what is ahead for this refit of the ship? Will that mean crew changes? Will that, what does all this mean? There's a lot of uncertainty that we can imagine being in the unnamed crew that we see walking in the hallways in our imagination. So it was a very important conversation to have. We get into some other things as well, but I'll let them be surprises. So join me for 1B's table talk.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. And then the commercial ends.
What was the commercial?
Oh God, they're so dreadful.
Ravioli. Can you find ravioli next time?
I will do my best to
Yes,
find
Oscar Mayer.
something
Oscar
like
Mayer has a
something
way
food
with
related.
BOLOGNA.
I've been having fun with the car and the razor blades, but
Yeah,
my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
the nubs, the nubs. All right, so gents, we have a little bit of time for table talk, I think. Are there anything we need to talk about?
Are we getting really good or really lucky?
Well, let's talk about the challenge dice.
Hmm.
It's a standard D6. It has a 1 success.
Yeah.
It has a 2 success face. It has 2 blanks.
Mhm.
And it has 2 effects.
So we have been getting lucky. We've been pulling up a lot of those little Nova
Pretty
stars.
much. Well, we haven't been unlucky in most cases.
Right. We've not been getting
Blanks.
more stars than blanks and more star faces than blanks, and there's
And
an
more
equal
effects
chance.
than anything
So,
else.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
been kind
I
of
think the
interesting.
effects would be considered quite lucky.
Yeah.
So the effects, as we said before, count as 1 success and 1 effect.
Right.
So
And we were lucky in the fact that we managed to generate enough work for that effect.
We didn't
grant
need
us a
multiple
breakthrough.
rolls per step. That's what we've been lucky at.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is how I'm setting the difficulty of the task. Very often, extended tasks are 10 or more work.
Right.
It's not as often to find 5, and what is the purpose of one that's 5? And it's to represent the kind of thing that we were representing. It's not satisfying to roll once and you created all this cool tech, right? But it's also not something that you want to repeatedly fail at all the way through. So it's kind of that happy, or hopefully happy, medium where we get to explore who the characters are and how they approach tasks and who they ask for help and that sort of stuff.
So we haven't been hitting any really challenging tasks yet that have really been pushing us.
Right.
It's all been sort of
Right. We haven't had to take any stress, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, we haven't really hit anything where our characters, whomever we happen to be playing at the moment, are disagreeing, like seriously disagreeing in such a fashion that the stakes of what happened is going to fall onto somebody's responsibility, as opposed to the other person's, which is something that I've been sort of paying attention to as a dramatic feature. If I really, really don't want to analyze a micro play. I keep saying I don't want to do that. So this is more of a request for your opinions, because we've all been grunting through the text to some extent, right? And I really saw it in the end of, or rather the beginning of last session when we did the values and the mission check, the advancement system.
Reputation.
It's not really the right word, but the sort of evaluation of how we've done, right? And for lack of a better word, from the game author's point of view. And one thing that really struck me is the ideology of this whole game is that we as players are trying to live up to Federation ideals. Notice I didn't say the characters. We as players are idealizing the Federation as kind of the gold standard of how we are to be evaluated. We're trying to become better Federation officers via our characters.
Or if you want promotion,
right?
That's what you'll have
But
to do.
it's phrased very much in that sense, and the notion of I mean, I'm not saying the Federation are villains, right? That's not what I'm not reversing it for edgy, for edgelord cred. But I am saying it's kind of, there's something very post original series about idealizing the Federation as standards to which we, as modern 20th century, early 21st century humans, should want to be like, right? We should want to be like the Federation. We should look forward to the bright post scarcity future, and so playing it in much more of this kind of rough and tough mavericky way that we're playing it, or tend to be leaning, in a way we're kind of, I mean, I look at that system, or I look at these mechanics, and I kind of go, where's the I'm not saying it's not there, and we've actually managed to find it a little bit, but where's the drama of being dropped in a situation where the Federation can't help us? Where's our, I'm just thinking about the episodes that we've been looking at, where clearly people on the ship frankly disagree, and not just main cast. I mean, you have these one-shot supporting characters who come in, who are very consequential, who have opinions that just throw the whole situation askew.
Right. Well, part of that is going to be reflected in how I tailor those printed questions to match original series flavor, but also match, I think, aid and relief is maybe not the first choice of many who play the game. I mean, the ongoing mission, or the or patrol duties are probably more common, and you can see how those questions match up with the Enterprise assignment, or Voyager or Deep Space Nine more readily than they do with what we're doing. So those questions need to be adjusted to reflect what we're actually doing. So hopefully the next time you're due.
Yeah, I'm not seeing this as an objection on my part. I'm just finding that, just as you're saying, this mode of adjustment that you're talking about, we're finding kind of necessary to do. Is that?
I know I am. I mean, I had to step away from the original rules as printed, because I found them to generate promotion too quickly, and without any real context for where it was coming from. Not enough context for where it's coming from. And these ones make a lot of sense in the Klingon context, and adjusted for the Starfleet context, they were very specifically and obviously constructed for next generation values.
Right.
And so they need some tweaking, especially in light of this crisis response thing we've got going on. There's different questions that need to be asked, because if you think about it, we're very often going to be triggering the use the directive. It'll be like a freebie, because our directive is go out and help people.
Well, yeah, we're doing that already. So there you go. Yeah. Right.
So, okay.
But
anything else?
Right, but just to be clear, our directive is the part about not raising hostilities, right? For this mission.
That's the additional directive on this mission, right? Is to prevent hostilities. Now you've seen signs now of why that
possible hostilities. Right. Possible hostilities are underway. I don't know if prevent is possible at this point.
Right. And if you notice, we don't have any real diplomatic contact with Elas.
No, I've been kind of wondering about Elas in all of this.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if you guys have reviewed the episode in question, but they are. Yeah.
Well, I mean, upon this discovery, I think Elas is going to have a lot of questions. Maybe tell them.
Right. So questions that make sense to me to ask are are the Troyans kind of stepping in between the Federation and Elas in this regard, and and why would they do that?
You'd think what with this whole peacemaking, wedding, whatnot that seems to have occurred or was supposed to have occurred, that they would have coordinated with Elas in this situation rather than otherwise.
Than taking lead. Yeah. So there's some interesting questions for the politically minded aboard the Avicenna to be wondering about. Everybody's been so busy trying to just find
We've had technical
ship,
problems. Yeah.
Right?
We had a difficult technical task.
So in the next installment, in the next session, one of the early scenes is going to have to be some discussions of the ramifications of what if the ship is destroyed, and what does it mean that there's not enough wreckage? Like, what does that actually mean that there's not enough wreckage and things like that? So,
I have a procedural question about supporting characters.
Yeah.
Or even, I guess, NPCs that wouldn't account for. But I'm thinking of in Obsession, the son of
Garovic,
right of the Farragut's captain, and I'm also thinking, especially in Balance of Terror, the kind of hardcore
Styles.
junior officer, right, Styles, who is virulently anti-Romulan and quickly anti-Vulcan. And this is my question. When you say something like, hey, we need a supporting character here, just like we just did.
How free are you to make them racist or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. Because those people can actually become the primary conflict of a whole episode, to the point where one of us might be playing, what's his name? The guy in Obsession. You just said his name. What was it?
Garovic.
Right, Garovic, where he assaults Kirk on the planet.
Well, to save his life, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I know, but he attacks him. He makes an attack roll.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, could a player have, like, player A could have said, oh yeah, he's got these qualities, and everybody's like, that's not optimal, and the player says, up yours, I just made him up, it's not optimal.
Well,
he's all about this.
Here's my
and then wait, and then player B later in the episode goes ahead and has him attack, not the same player. See what I mean?
Yeah, someone else. Yeah.
The point being that the players have bought into that designation of the character, and through role playing, we've made him almost adversarial.
Sure. It's not something I want to see all the time, but it is something I want to see. There's, with this game, which gives me certain authorities, there are, and because I've surrendered control over the middle and end, but there is a theme. When I'm preparing the beginning, I can feel kind of like a unifying theme. And the first one, I just felt like what we were really exploring was the nature of threat. Like on a player level, just what do the red tokens do? But also on, we're an aid and rescue ship. What does it really mean to put ourselves between, to rescue to people in peril and to represent or raise up the oppressed or the downtrodden? What does that actually mean? So it's the nature of threat that spoke to me. So that's how I want to portray NPCs and the people that you meet, is through that lens. And so here, what's calling to me is that notion of duty. Right. So in this episode, why wouldn't we? Right. It seems like a good thing that some of the crew represent the attitudes that Captain Tillich spoke up against in the very first scene.
Right.
Who was he talking to that is suspicious of aliens in command, who is suspicious of non-Federation sources, who maybe volunteered to serve on a ship of war so they could strike back for the victims of the past, right? They have to be on the ship somewhere. So we can't have everybody being 100% loyal, teamwork driven,
right,
all the time, but we also can't have a seething mass of
Right,
mindless racists either. And,
well, especially because Telek actually made that role too, so you know we have
Right.
some.
so we got to.
Can I
Yeah.
can I
please.
add? I'd like to add two things, if I could. One being, is there anything in the mechanic for Anthony to sort of guide this? Because we do have the mechanic of complications and threat. And I would like to see those complications and threats show up inside the crew. That makes total sense. So if we do need to create someone new, would it make sense? Like, I'm not comfortable adding my own complications to a crew member just for the sake
Right,
of making
exactly.
things strange.
Yeah.
But if Anthony says, okay, I would like a complication here with this member that we're creating, and give us the freedom to role play it out, but say this is part
He's
of
wearing
the threat.
that
This is part.
complication, right?
Sure.
Exactly.
Right.
I spend
Exactly.
2 threat, and we can color
Yeah.
them.
I would
Yeah.
totally like
So
that
let's-
marriage of
Right.
sort of theme and
That's great.
mechanic.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. So if we were to take an example of the guy I'd like to contrast those two characters that I just mentioned. In the case of Styles with Balance of Terror, we know his background and we know that he's, you know, kind of a very anti-Romulan dude. But that could just be stated, for example, by the guy who makes them up. And so it's not like a threat or anything. It's just an attitude. It's something to say. And his behavior is totally in the wind, right, for whoever plays him.
Right, he's a
But
good
then
officer.
the GM, right, but exactly. Then the GM comes in, uses threat to make a complication that says, and now he's anti-Vulcan and anti-Spock. Right. And that's going to be a problem. That's going to add difficulty.
Right.
That's going to add
create problem.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
Right. And so then
There's-
in the case of the other fellow whose name for some reason I can't say his name. What is up with that?
Garavik.
Yeah, what Garavik is? Who makes what is that? He on the other hand almost seems more like a full-blown NPC with like a very specific backstory.
Yeah, he has
very
too much
specific.
to do from the game master's perspective. He has to be an NPC, and he might even
and
he's one who generates threat rather than
yeah, exactly. He's coming in hot, you know, with directional notions and everything already. Something like I'm also thinking now of all these characters who are so important in the episodes. We've got like the 3 Muds women, and then we discover that one of them is more ethical and more idealistic than the other 2. Is that because a player got an advantage? And before that, they were just 3 bimbos, and now one of them is, okay, she's actually a deeper person. She's got more to do. I mean, and that's an NPC though, I guess, or maybe just a supporting. I don't know.
Yeah,
see what I mean?
They're NPCs, but it, right, because we're not going to task players with making up story on purpose.
I get that completely, but putting in conflict is part of what is at least the player can't make a complication. What the player can do is lay groundwork if complications want to land on people rather than just having another piece of equipment break.
Well, we do have the opportunity to describe the threat that we're buying.
Yeah.
And this is how I see that we influence the negatives of the story. That when we buy that dice, we give a little bit of a description as to how we think that threat might play out. We give the gap in our attempt. Yeah. So that I like doing it that way. That gives it's not really playing the enemy, but it is giving some hooks for Anthony.
So if I'm a player and I'm going to buy some threat, I can look across our supporting characters and our second, you know, all of our various people that we've got walking around on 2 legs or however, and say, I'm thinking that this is going to go into the people situation. This is going to go into the characters that we've got running around for the GM to now develop. Or I can say,
character did. that
Right.
generated the threat.
Yeah, exactly. And or it could be aesthetically more pleasing to me to say I am all about this horrific minefield of asteroids and moons and lava and heavy metals, and it's an aesthetic choice. You're looking at the people and you're looking at the circumstance and you're going, ooh, I want the threat there. Right? Without, I mean, that seems like something that the player would just kind of spitball as they go, not in a scriptwriter standpoint, but in a
Wouldn't it
almost
be
a
cool?
more, yeah, almost more of a, as I keep talking about, the scriptwriter before they're writing the scriptwriter in their fugue state of coolness. Right? That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about writing. We're talking about pre-writing, the ooh part of it.
Yeah. So
There was one quick follow-up that I was going to add in there in terms of the backstory. Anthony, I know you are a world builder and you often think of these things, so I might be one step behind you on this. But in terms of these ideas of crew difficulties, we are a crew in transition, and we most certainly have a lot of people on this ship that are holdovers from our more military objective. And I see some really nice opportunity for having that sort of split crew idea. And some of these people that we're talking about that could have the potential problem would be from the more militant background of the ship.
What's interesting then is it validates some of our own backstories. I mean, we've got sorry.
It's okay.
We've got with Korsakov that sort of rough and tough beginning, and then the mitigation of that through his experiences with the disease and the artifact. So now he's a lot more cautious than he used to be. I mean, that's
but his crew might not be, right? His department.
Right.
Yeah.
So he often has to, so that's something we can kind of face. Or I really, really just am dying for, I was looking at your reflection, Casey, about playing Ensign Yang, and you were really focusing on the rank, right? You were really focusing on, well, he's an ensign, he has to do what he's told, and you were questioning that in yourself. I wouldn't otherwise bring it up. You're the one who started questioning or thinking about how you were going to do it. And I wanted to promote or suggest or consider that rank is probably the least important variable, right? As opposed to role and as opposed to values. I mean, you got a starring role, right? Your name comes up, in the credits, in the opening credits, not at the end credits. There's a reason we're looking at Ensign Yang and not one of the other ensigns.
If a camera is parked right in front of the helm.
yeah, exactly. I mean, he's not furniture. So I'm liking the idea of the tensions. I mean, we keep wanting to see the untapped potential, and the dice keep kicking us, right? But
we got to see some today.
We got the one. We got to see a little bit at last.
One effect.
Right.
We got the threat, which was probably the best one.
Right. So I'm liking that. I want, the personalities. And so in order for our personalities to struggle against values, right, or to show our own values, to complicate our values, to challenge our values, we got to have people who
it can't be
present their own values, right? We got to have people with their own values to bump up against.
Yeah. So there's lots of things like that to consider. You have to look at why the chief medical officer, Jim, right, of all the ships in Starfleet, why this ship?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we sending an Andorian?
And also, he wasn't even intended to be. I mean, he's not just an intern, but he was not intended to be the chief medical officer.
Right.
Now
he is by circumstance.
Yeah.
So those are interesting questions. Where does all this stuff come from? And so hopefully the exploration of it will be fun, and
cool.
And not just fun, but Star Trekian. All right.
But where we place threat as players, therefore, becomes pretty important.
Well, threat spends, on my part, are decoupled from source.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm looking for is when a character generates threat, that they're telling me what it is about their activity in that task that is risky or bold or daring, or and then they're imagining the task and I'm imagining the task. What are some possible complications which might arise? I'm really interested in hearing those, but I can't always spend the threat on that thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, we get that. Yeah. But the articulation in the beginning is part of the process.
It's part of the character, right? It
Yeah,
shows
part
what
of
the
the
character's
mix
aware
of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I guess another way to look at it is that when you're generating threat, you can always look. The source may be internal as a character. Maybe it's a sign of weakness or a sign of vulnerability, or doing something not very nice to, and a crewmate is probably going to fight him back at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we saw at the beginning of tonight. I mean, the jealousy / hostility against Golden Boy and Senang.
If I bought the dice with threat, then that hostility.
Right. Then it would have simmered. It at least was not determined that Anthony had to do that, but it's there in his stew
on my radar
to work with when circumstances demand it, if you will.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, this is really stimulating. I hate to break away, but I must break away. And I really got a kick out of tonight's session. I hope you did. I know that from some viewers' perspective, there may have been extended tasks is just they just rolled dice. But I really enjoyed what you did with that gated challenge, like what I learned about the secondary characters who didn't exist before this episode, and what I learned about the Avicenna just by trying to explain the task and how you approach doing the task. I mean, I have a much clearer view of the inside of the ship now for some reason than I did 2 hours ago. So
I didn't want to leave the torpedo range. I didn't want to leave it. I'm like, no, wait, man, I like standing in there. That's cool. I want to do
with all those pipes, right? The coolant
everywhere.
everywhere.
I mean, who wants to?
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
Until next time.
We'll see you next week.
Take care, everybody.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.